really thank you guys, and I'll hand it over to you guys now. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Most well. We have absolutely nothing better to do on a Friday evening here. So let me share my screen. Hannes, I guess you're going to share your screen at one point, so we'll just.
We will sync our presentations for that. That's fine.
Yeah. Let me know when you see my screen.
I see Anders on your screen.
Yeah, you're sharing me.
It looks ultra wide too. Good. There it is.
There it is. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So, so first of all, thanks a lot for having us. As you mentioned, my name is Kent, and I'm working at CT Global, formerly known as Cortec, but we changed our name a couple of years ago for various different reasons. One of them being not owning the .com domain. So, I mean, it's really difficult to have anyone from US to mail you when you have a .dk domain that for whatever reason you just don't do that. So we have to change that. And with me today I have my colleague, and Anders, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Anders Rødland, and I work for City Global here in the US. I'm originally from Norway, but my wife, she is from the US, and she wanted to go back. So I live in Austin, Texas now. I've been working with the client side, like config manager and Intune for many years, and I'm very happy to be presenting at this user group.
Yeah, and I just want to say that I have the deck here in full screen. So if there are any questions, Greg, I cannot see them, but you know, I take it that you will read them if there is any, right?
Yep. And yeah, we'll moderate those.
Perfect. And if you don't understand we used to call it my Dinglish because it's late Friday evening and you know little tired, just ask me to repeat myself. I would be happy to do that. Yeah. With that, so this 40-50 minute session here is called Why Endpoint Security Begin with Asset Health. Hannes and I have been doing a lot of security lately, and security is always super interesting and extremely important. But one of the things that we keep on seeing is that you know you're just focusing on what you can see right in front of you. So when you talk about security, you talk about you know the 10,000 devices that you can see in whatever console you're working with, and it is really much more than that. So what we want to do is we just want to give you know an introduction to asset health. There are some old things within SCCM. There are some new things in SCCM. Just want to give our what we call holistic approach to that. We are going to look at some community solutions. As you know, Anders developed a community solution. We are fortunate enough to have him here on the call, so he can talk much more about that. We're going to look at some of the you know how do we verify that an SCCM agent is actually healthy, and if it's reporting, does that mean that the agent is actually healthy? Because if it's not delivering the data that you need, then by definition, by my definition, you have an unhealthy agent, and we've seen that a lot. So what are the consequences of poor asset health, and how does that help us when we are trying to secure endpoints, or how does that not help us when we're trying to secure our endpoints here? Yeah, and again, if there are any questions whatsoever, just stop us. So when we say holistic approach, and what I'm trying to do with this illustration here of multitasking, what I really mean is when we are focusing on one thing. So let's say, for instance, we're focusing on, we have a graph query where we go in, we focus on how many active devices do I have in Intune. Then we tend not to focus on maybe some of the other platforms that we have. So let's say we have Cisco Umbrella, and if all of your clients have to be, active in both Umbrella and in Intune and within Config Manager and within Active Directory, how do you really ensure that that's going on? So what we would typically do is we would go ahead. So for Snow, for Traps, for this Heimdall, that's a specific Danish security solution, and for Cisco Umbrella, we have some public APIs. So for these last 4 ones here, more or less everybody can go in, have a look at those public APIs, and then from there, simply grab, okay, how many active clients have I had within the last period of time? For Active Directory, I have added in a query example in the slide notes here. But what we would typically do is look at, okay, how many active have we had within the last period of time, and how many inactive have we had within the last period of time, and then we simply just compare those numbers there with what we have within SCCM and what we have within Intune, and if they don't match, we have a problem. And very often they don't match. So I don't know how you handle this today. If you have these humongous Excel spreadsheet or advanced queries or whatever you have, but you need to bring it in into Excel, into Power BI, into whatever BI solution that you can get your hands on, and then just compare those numbers and show them side by side. Otherwise, it's simply too difficult to figure out, if you are secure, if you're not secure. And it doesn't really, help you much if you have 8,400 devices checking into Config Manager on a daily basis. If Umbrella is your security solution and you have, 1,000 less devices checking in here, then something is wrong. So baselining, define what is a healthy device in your environment. Well, a healthy device in my environment needs to have this agent, that agent, and so on and so forth. And then you have, your baseline there, and that baseline, just go ahead and create that within SCCM, and then visualize that somehow. So that's kind of the the holistic approach that we are using here. And we'll get much more into details about this, but it's just kind of to set the scene. And again, up here, what I'm, the whole idea with this drawing is, you need to focus on everything. And we all know we cannot multitask, or at least I cannot multitask. And focusing on everything is also super important, because if it's not right in front of me, if it's out of my sight, it's out of my mind. So I need to bring these close to each other. So that's like a quick intro here. Anders, I don't know if you want to take the screen here, or if you want me just to show the slide and then you can chat a little bit and then you can take over.
I can take over the screen here.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Second, and I'll switch to the next slide as well. So yeah, just let me know when you guys can see my screen here. You can see it counting.
I see it.
Perfect. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about a community tool that I released. It's called Config Manager Client Health. And this is something like, it's not something new. It's been out there now for like 5 or 6 years. So the thing is like the Config Manager client, right? It can break. I've seen that happen too many times. It's like I used to work for a managed service provider where we managed IT for multiple companies, and we were responsible for managing the clients and updating them. And by we, I mean me. I was responsible to update the clients. And as many of you have experienced, I guess, is that every month, right, you have Patch Tuesdays, new patches are released, you have your process to push out patches. And then I saw like compliance of like 80%, 85%, sometimes I saw like 90% for some customers. And it's like, it's okay, it's not really great. And in my opinion, it's like the number one thing you can do to secure your endpoints is to install updates. It's like the updates, they fix security holes, and it's not just updates for Windows, but we're talking updates for applications. But I was limited by the fact that Config Manager, it's like on a good day, maybe I hit like 92%. It's like what I was able to reach on compliance, like after maybe a week or 2 weeks after I released patches. But then we took on a new customer, and they had issues. I mean, big issues. We only succeeded to patch about 60% of the machines, and they just flat out refused, right? And so we did like a huge investigation trying to figure out what's going on. It was several thousand machines, and it's like, why are they not updating? We thought like, oh, there has to be one root cause, and we fix that one thing, and then it will go back up to where other customers were at. And it turned out we discovered all sorts of issues, right? We discovered like the Windows Update agent on a machine had issues on some machines. And of course, Microsoft, they had released a patch that would fix it. It's just that the machine refused to install the patch because the Windows Update agent was broken. We saw things like machines were reporting back to Config Manager in the update compliance that patch compliant is unknown, but the client is active. It's communicating. It's just we have no idea whether it's compliant or not, right? And that turned out to be like, it's not sending state messages, and we saw all kinds of issues with the Config Manager client that would prevent the endpoints from installing updates. And this customer, they also had some machines that were running Windows 7. It's a couple of years ago that were Windows 7 32-bit, and that actually had a pretty nasty bug. It's like once you had installed a certain amount of updates, Windows 7 will start telling Config Manager that I'm compliant. I'm 100% compliant to every update you deploy to me. And then you went in and looked at the machine, and it's been like it hadn't installed a single update in more than a year. Yet it was telling Config Manager it was compliant. Of course, Microsoft, they had a patch that would fix it. It's just that when you deploy this update from Config Manager, the machine would tell, that's great, but I don't need it. I'm already compliant. So it's like after that patch incident, I was like, there has to be a better way to do this. So I started working on the Config Manager client health. It was inspired by Jason Sandy's startup script. That's why it's kind of similar, like it runs as a startup script. It has the config file. It was very inspired by that. And I put basically in all the lessons learned we had from that patch incident, I put that into the Config Manager client health. And then I went and took it further, like what other community solutions do we have? Like, can we see like the client breaks like this, and we can run this specific detection on why the Config Manager client breaks. And this is how you fix it when it's broken in this state. And then I went and I implemented detection methods for that in the Config Manager client health, and also fixes. And I took this and I implemented this on another customer we were managing, and they were at 80% compliance, where typically where they would be like a week after the monthly patching. But when Config Manager client health was implemented for them, now they were up at like 97, 98%. So we saw a huge change, right? And we're talking about security fixes here. There were no applying successfully. So yeah, I'm sure many of you are already familiar with the solution, but I'm gonna, because it has been around for like 5-6 years now. But we do know, right, that the Config Manager client, it can break. We've seen it break. And what the Config Manager client, what that is, it's a PowerShell-based solution that will fix the broken clients, and it's initiated by the client itself. It's not Config Manager trying to start something on the machine. It's the client has a scheduled task where it will run the script on a schedule. It will just run the health check. If it detects the client is broken in any way, it will fix it, or in some cases, it will just reinstall the client. So you can use this to run a health check on your Config Manager clients at large in your environment. And there is also reporting to it. There's a database, and I think I'm going to show that. So let me jump in my lab really quick here. So I have a SQL database called a client health database. There's a table here called clients, and this will store the result of the health check. Right now, I only have one machine in here that in my lab that have run this health check. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this config manager client health on my config manager server. I think that's a good place to run, because I've got questions many times: is this safe to run on servers? And it is. The first version I released, I think that was version 0.4.0, the first one I released in public. A guy from India contacted me saying, like, thank you, I have 16,000 servers, this is great. So after that, I thought, okay, it's good that I start testing this on servers. So yeah, it's like right now I'm located, I'm in PowerShell here on my config manager server. Let me just open up the console so you can see. I have config manager installed here. I'm just going to run this manually for now, just so we can see kind of what it does. Config manager client health. What I do is, let me show this really quick. I have a config file where we can specify some things, right? We can put in, if we want to upgrade the client, we can put in the version in here. We can run a check to see that the site code is correct, that the domain is correct. And then there are multiple fixes, like tests it will run down here, and we can determine, do we want client help to fix it, or do we only want it to report on it? So we have a config file where we can configure what the health check will do and what it will not do. So what I'll do is I'll start config manager client health, and I use the config parameter. I'll point to the config file, and then I have a web service, and the web service, it acts. The script will send the result of the health check to the web service, and the web service will put the result into the database. And this web service, it used to be written in .NET Core 2. If you're using that version 1, please upgrade to the new version 2. That is written in, I rewrote it using .NET Framework 4.8. Because the old version, like that was based on .NET Core 2, that's end of life. It's not like Microsoft don't update .NET Core 2. It has some very bad security vulnerabilities. So please go ahead and upgrade. So yeah, I'm gonna specify memcm /config client health, specifying the address to the web service. I'm gonna execute this on my server, and here we see it actually found something, right? The cache size on the client in this case was configured to be 8 GB. In my config file, I've actually specified that to be 16 up here. So it detected that the cache size was wrong, and it fixed it. And now if I execute the query on the database here again, we can now see that my config manager server is also added in here. So that's really what there is to the health check, right? It's a PowerShell-based script. I recommend you to use group policy to create a scheduled task that will run this health check. And one thing I want to say is, like, please sign this PowerShell script. This one, please sign it. Don't run it unsigned, because the script requires it will run using system credentials, and having something run like a script run a system on all your endpoints. That right there is a bit scary. So lock down this share, make sure only authorized administrators can actually make modifications to this file share, and also sign the script so that people can't just go in and make changes to it. Then I'm going to show something new that is coming that I've been working on lately, that I'm going to release very, very soon, because I know many of you already use this. I created a new console extension called Client Health in here. Like, this dashboard don't have much yet, but what I'm basically doing is this config file is going to go away. We're not going to use this anymore. Instead of moving this into the console, everything's going to be stored in a database, and we'll have, instead of having multiple config files for different environments or configurations, we'll have configuration profiles. And everything you could configure in that config XML, you'll be able to configure it from the config manager console itself. So in here, you'll be able to see the same information right here. We're defining the parameters, like how config manager client help will install the config manager client if it decides that it needs to be reinstalled, or if the machine doesn't even have the client in the first place. We have the remediation settings here. We can select like how do we want to run the tests, like do we want to skip it completely, do we want to just monitor it, just get the current status into the database, or do we actually want to remediate something? And then we can define services as well. We can define like certain services on the machines are supposed to start automatically and are supposed to be running. And one thing I like to do is the config manager client itself. If client help detects that it's been running for 7 days, I like to just restart it. That is a dirty way of fixing something, but this fixes issues with the config manager client, where suddenly it's no longer receiving policy, you restart the service, and everything flies again. So Kent, that is what I wanted to show on the client health. So if you like to go ahead with the next slide.
Sure, I will. So let me just share my screen again.
We do have a couple questions as well while you guys are transitioning. So Fenton had a question about SQL port changing and how to get clients to connect to the database again, but it wasn't completely clear to me. So I don't know, Anders, if you want to read that and see if you have an answer there, or if we need more information.
So what I can tell, if your clients use, if you use the web service, that makes it much easier to use a non-standard port, right? Because you can configure that in the connection string for the web service itself. You can define the port there, because then the clients, they will just connect to the web service using HTTP or HTTPS. And they will send a result, and then the web service will send the result to the SQL server using the connection string that you defined. And in the connection string, you can define the host name of the SQL server, the instance, and the port.
All right, thanks. And then we had one other question about whether you script will work over CMG or clients off of the LAN or VPN.
So this is super interesting. This is something I'm experimenting with right now, and the way to get this working is it's not going to work straight off from the CMG, but if you publish the web service using the Azure AD application proxy, then you can get that working.
Okay, thanks. Oh, you can.
Okay, cool. I'm just thinking here we should do a full session just on the tool there. So. As Anders was saying, this is, this solution or something similar, something we should just have, running at every CM installation. There are also some other features, and those of you who have already migrated to 2010, you have probably seen the, the monitoring solution that we have in here, where we can go in and run the client health monitoring and also the SQL broker one. The client health monitoring here is it's running by default, so you don't really have to do anything. You can go in and configure it. There are some settings, so you can disable it. You can configure it to run the simulations at different times. But it is kind of neat. Some of the things that we are checking in here is the ability to use the fast channel. So is that fast channel working? Do you have any backlogs somewhere? So when this is configured, and again, this is configured by default, then I'm not saying that it will go fix everything, because it's not what Anders just showed you, but it will give you insights into, hey, do you have any backlogs, as I mentioned? And if you don't have any other monitoring solution, this is this will really work. And if you haven't seen it, Let me just see here, where did you go? So when I go to the monitoring solution here, or the monitoring node, you have scenario health all the way down here, and I know you probably can't see it, but here you have your client action health, and you have your SQL broker service. And if I go into show the status, then this window probably looked pretty familiar to you, because you have done, I don't know how many in-place upgrades of your CM environment. So it's exactly the same framework. And when you look at the window here, notice this down here, because this is really, the key to understanding. So what is this action do? What does that action do? Just like when we are performing an upgrade and you go in, you open up your site comp, you open up your CM update and so on to really understand what's going on, you do the same in here. So when you want to figure out, okay, so what kind of simulations are we running in here? Take a look, open the log files, start the simulation, manually, and then simply monitor, what is going on in here. This will also return a status ID. So we can go in and create a status filter rule in here. So once this is all done, then we have whatever the ID is, something like 540999 or something like that. But it is in the docs. So just want to highlight this, because on the server side, this is neat. On the client side, I mean, we have had this solution here for ages. I even remember Greg and I was talking about this in I think it was in Germany at one point. So on the client, we have had the CCM evaluation running as a scheduled task. So the CCM evaluation, when it runs, it will simply go in and read your CCM evaluation XML file. In there, you have configured. Maybe you haven't configured anything, but in there you will see Microsoft have configured certain rules that it has to run and evaluate. So, is WMI still working? Check. Is this still working? Check. Is that still working? Check, and so on and so forth. This has become better over the years, and it is. It's definitely checking for a lot of things, and you can go in and customize this. I know Sherry, she has a blog post on how you can customize the XML file to also restart the service. And this is simply running out of the box on a daily basis. You can go into the CCM evaluation registry key in here and then change. Okay, how often do I want to run this? If something happens, do I want to configure it to like notify only? Or do I want it to go ahead and remediate? So you can control that, and creating a CI that turns notify only over to true, especially on servers. That might be a good idea. So it doesn't all of a sudden start installing a prerequisite or something like that outside of a maintenance window. Now the question here is, so should I be running that? And then the awesome tool that Anders just showed you, and the answer is absolutely. I mean, this runs out of the box. Anders' tool is doing something similar, and a lot of other cool stuff that we're not doing in here. But you need to be aware of this. And there was a question just earlier: does this work over CMG? This works perfectly over CMG. It doesn't really matter as long as we can communicate in here. So you're running this, you're running this by default. Now, this is the agent. So now let's say the agent is working. Now we all know that the SCCM agent has there are a ton of actions. So when you go into the control panel and you click on actions, you can see there's hardware inventory, there's heartbeat inventory, there's all of these different actions in here, and it is not uncommon at all that the agent is communicating with your management point. The agent is, communicating all the way up. But when you look, you don't have any recent hardware data. So one of the things that you really need to pay close attention to is, when was the last time you received any hardware data? When was the last time if at all, I'm not working with software inventory, not in our environment, so I don't really care about that. But I do care about my heartbeat discovery record. So I want this to come in daily. I want that one over there to come in daily. I want to make sure when we are scanning for software updates that happens at least every 3 days. I want to make sure when we have patch Tuesdays that none of my clients, they have gone 30 days without, installing any updates. And then still, if I'm not using a CMG, I want to verify that that you are reporting into a boundary group. This, I would say, still with the CMG. Now this is not as super important to me any longer, but I still like to monitor this. So how do we monitor this? Well, we have all the information that we need if we go into WMI. So what I've done in here is I've just, hardware inventory, software inventory, heartbeat, they just report into inventory action status here. Location services, that's where I will have the, the name of my boundary group cache. Software updates, if I go into the update store and I look at the CCM update status, I'll be able to see, okay, when was the last scan date there? And then for my update install, there are different ways to do that, but I've been using Win32 quick fix engineering, simply just to see, okay, what's going on in here. And I'm speeding up a little bit because I'm not running out of time yet, but we are within 12 minutes here. So let me just show you a few examples. So what I have, and I had to restart my device. Oops. My device just before we went live here. Oh, I really wanted to open this instead. So while that one is loading, in WMI, and I just loaded WMI, here you can see, for instance, if I want to go in and have a look at my inventory data, I have them up here. If I want to have a look at my software updates, they are in root CCM software updates in the update store. So when I look in the update store, now I actually selected my inventory, that doesn't really matter. But then when I look in my inventory action store here, you will see here I have my hardware inventory. You can tell by version or value 1. I have my data discovery record. You can tell by value 3. Software inventory has value number 2. And in here, we can have a look and see, okay, so when was the last time actually, you ran a successful hardware inventory data? That's on the client side. That's not the same as the inventory data actually made it all the way up to the database. That's super important. But on the client side, you're good. So by knowing that, see where I have it. I can simply go in here and then say, okay, so let me know when was the last time I ran this. So if I run this little script, it will return the number of days since my last inventory. So I know, okay, I ran this earlier today, and that also makes sense. I can see that down here. So if I take that information, if I take this script here, let's just take the script, use that as an example, go into CM, go into my configuration item, create a new configuration item. Call it demo. That's a good name. Inventory, 7 days. And then this is a script. The data type here is an integer. And then I just add my script. Here we are. And in my compliance rule, I'll go in and say, well, if this here is less than 7 days, so if it's less than 7, then I'm happy. Then we are compliant. So by taking the information I have in WMI in here, just by going into my, as I mentioned, my CCM update status, figuring out when was the last time you actually performed a scan, then I can do the same. I can take this, turn that into a CI, and then all of a sudden I have a healthy client. You know, we know that because we have the tool that Anders just showed you. We know that from CCM eval. And now we also know, well, hardware inventory seems to be working. My software update scan, and here you can see it is literally the same. I'm going into the update store. I'm looking at the CCM update status. That seems to be working. So now I know that my client is also working. It's reporting back in. So I have a trustworthy client here. I have just 30 seconds left, so I just want to do I think I had it here, a shout out. Was that to Sherry on her blog? You have a neat little script that will go in and randomly force a full hardware inventory. And why you want to do that? That's simply because you want to make sure that your inventory data make it all the way into the database. And those of you who have been working with CM for quite a while, you probably know that sometimes those inventory data, they have a tendency of ending up in the bad MIFs folder. How do you fix that? To be honest, the easiest way, simply just to run a full inventory. So what she's doing out here is she's just saying, you know, we're just going to take a random number, you know, between 1 and 4, and if you select, you know, 2, as I had here, that's not equal to 1, so I won't be doing anything on your device, I won't be doing anything on your device. I'm glad that I'm not playing Lotto here. Oh, there it was. So, you know, on some devices, in my experience here, you know, on my device, it would every 4 days or 5 days or what have you, depending on how often I run this, you just go ahead and run a full inventory. So we have the client, and we also have the client components, and you need to think about everything. With that, Anders, if you wanna take it back.
Absolutely. So let me go ahead and share my screen again, and let's see here. Yeah, for the next thing I want to show, I'm actually going to go into Defender for Endpoints. As I said when I talked about Config Manager Client Health, it's like the number one thing you can do to secure your endpoints is to make sure that you install updates. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Defender for Endpoint here, and this is a demo environment that has been compromised. It's been really badly breached, as you will soon see. And it's going to show a little bit what we can do, expand this so we can see what we're doing here. I'm going to go into the threat analytics dashboard that we have in Defender for Endpoint. Defender for Endpoint, that's they rebranded Windows Defender ATP to Microsoft Defender. So this takes about half a minute to load, but it's coming up. What this dashboard does, it will show you all the active threats that Microsoft see out there in the world. And as we can see in this environment, if I scroll down here, I see that I actually there's actually one threat there called admin Rødland using DDE. And I can see that I actually have one device in this lab environment that has an active alert, and there's been a total of 2 devices with alerts. So I can click on that, and I can go in and I can read some more information about this breach or about this attack. I can read the analyst report, like how do you mitigate this? But just so we can see the environment we have here, like I have a domain controller of Server 2019, I have Windows 10, Windows 8, I have Android, Mac OS, Linux, iOS, Server 2016. There's even Windows 7 in here. So there's a little bit of everything. And I'm gonna speed run this because we don't have much time left. If I go to the threat and vulnerability management dashboard, we'll see I have an exposure score of 52. That's basically you want this score to be as low as possible. This is Microsoft calculate the exposure score. The higher the score, the more you're exposed to risks. And then there's another score they call the Microsoft Secure Score for Devices, which shows you the configurations that you've taken to harden your environment. And there's another thing here that I find is very relevant. That is security recommendations. We can see in this lab, what do they consider? What do Microsoft Defender consider are the top actions I need to do right now to secure my environment? And the number one is actually to update WinRAR to a newer version. I can see on the threats showing here over there, right, that there's a verified local privilege escalation exploit publicly available. This exploit is part of an exploit kit. There are known threats associated with it. And we're talking, yeah, we need to update Windows 10 OS and built-in applications. But there's a lot of updating third-party applications here. And as we saw in this device inventory, right, I have this domain controller here. I already know this is breached. I'm going to use something known as advanced hunting. This is a query-based tool that I can use. It uses custom queries, and I can use this to just ask question into the Defender for Endpoint database about anything I want to do that Defender for Endpoint have collected. So right here, I have a query where I'm asking into the device network events table. I'm specifying that the device name, it contains the MTP Air DC01, which is the name of the domain controller. The action type, I'm specifying it's inbound connection accepted, meaning only connections that have been successfully connected. And I'm specifying the port 3389, which is remote desktop. So basically what I'll be able to see with this query is who have successfully done a remote desktop to my domain controller. Running this query, getting a list here, and this is going to be a little bit depressing to see. Let me see if I can make these things a little bit smaller here. So I can click on here, right? I see a few things I see immediately, right? It's like there's been a lot of connections from a lot of external IPs to my domain controller. It's not so much fun. So I'm wondering who are these people connecting to my or remote desktoping to my domain controller. So let's take a look at this here. Let me go out of this so I can see the multiple tabs there. So now it's looking up some information about this IP address here. And we can see where is this, whenever this completes loading. So it's saying that this IP is actually from Cambodia. And I can see the state and the city. And then the question is, do I know of somebody in Cambodia that are supposed to remote desktop into my domain controller? And I can say no, I don't know of anybody. And another thing I want to see, like, have this IP been associated with anything else in this environment? And I can see that, yeah, it has actually. On these other devices here, been client machines, and then there's a web server. svchost.exe have accepted connections from this IP address as well. You know, this is really bad. This is not something that antivirus will pick up. You know, this is a breach, right? That I would say would have been prevented if this environment had been up to date, have been installed patches, have not been slacking installing Windows patches, or had updated their third-party applications. In my opinion, and I'm sure you have an opinion on this as well, Kent, is that the number one thing you can do, it is to update your environment. You don't want to end up and see something like this. And this is the risk we face today, because people don't, like, the machines are no longer only inside your office behind the firewall. People are working from home, they're taking their machine with them, go somewhere else and connect to other unsecured networks, and sometimes have direct connection to the internet. And we're much more vulnerable, much more exposed. And every month new vulnerabilities are discovered in Windows. We have to patch them, and we have to patch the applications.
And that's also why, as we said in the beginning, I mean, you really need to know. So, how do you define a healthy client in your environment? So a healthy client in our environment needs to be communicating with Defender. Okay, check. Do you know if it's communicating with Defender? It needs to be communicating with SCCM, with, you know, so you start by defining them, and then obviously, as you say, Anders, keep your devices up to date. I know Microsoft's been saying that for years, but now it's really more important than ever. And I mean, it can also be pretty painful for some organizations to, you know, update to a new Windows 10 version, but it's even more painful if you stay on 1809 and then you do an upgrade every second year. I mean, you need to get into a way better rhythm. And yeah.
Yeah, and as we also showed, right, it's like the config manager client, it can break. If you use config manager to update, you need to have a way to make sure that that client is healthy. And my free tool is one way to do it. There are also other ways, as Kent showed you. But you need to make sure that config manager don't lose management over your endpoints, and that you are capable of updating them.
Yeah, I think that was, Greg, that was our 50 minutes of fame. We went over by 2 minutes, but
that was great.